Howard, the floor is all yours, sir, for the next 40 minutes.
Thank you so much. If the floor is all mine, where's everybody going to sit? It's an old Groucho Marx joke. And I think I'm showing my age by even mentioning Groucho Marx, but be that as it may, my name is Howard Eber and I am an alcoholic. It's an interesting way we started. The life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than gatherings in hospitals. So it's more than just fellowship and service. It comes at a point right before Bill is going to leave the stage. He's been talking for 160 some odd pages, and he's about to sum it up on 164. And he's made some extraordinary statements at this point. This is one that kind of just woke me up. It's more than just fellowship, and it's more than just service. It's about cleaning up family differences, settling family differences. Think about that for a minute. Way back on page 60, Bill told us that even when our intentions are good, aren't we not the source of confusion rather than harmony? And here we are 100 pages later, and we've become a source of harmony within the family. That we weren't creating the chaos. There's actually people in the family who are coming and saying, hey, what do you think about that? Asking me what I thought about things. That's the last person anybody ever asked about anything. But I was the first person they asked to leave, though. I'll tell you that. Incidentally, I wanted to acknowledge a couple of things. I want to acknowledge Mike and AJ, and especially Stephanie. Stephanie, 2 days. Congratulations. To Stephanie, this is probably going to sound like a little discouraging, but I don't mean it that way. And that is that I want to tell you that this is a lot worse than you thought it was. Things are a lot worse than you think they are. That our problems, your problems, my problems were a lot more comprehensive than I ever thought they were. At 2 days, you just want to know, how do I get to a third day? And that's all I care about at that point, is how do I get to a third day and a fourth day? But at some point, that I can exhale a bit, and it's at that point that I have to start to do things differently. What do I have to do? First thing I have to do is I have to connect. I've got to make a connection with this fellowship. Bill, we just read that Bill said it's more than just fellowship in hospitals. So the first thing is fellowship. We come and we connect. We're people who ordinarily would not connect. We would not have anything to do with anybody else. This is a disease of isolation. So one of the first things we have to do is connect, to feel part of. And I don't think that Zoom meetings exempt us from that. I have family and people on Zoom that I've never met, that I feel like we have the same blood running in our veins. I can have that fellowship. And the next thing I have to do is, once I connect in that fellowship, I have to find somebody. I've got to find somebody and say, I want that. I want what that person has. I want the way they carry themselves. It's not always what they say. I mean, I sat next to a lot of people over a lot of years who had all of the Gucci sayings, had all of the best jokes, the best one-liners in the world. But when they weren't sharing, they were just sitting next to people and gossiping and character assassinating and making jokes and sarcastic comments about everybody in the room. That's not the guy we're talking about. We may be talking about the person who doesn't raise his hand at every meeting, but when he says things, you see that doesn't betray the way they live. This is who that person is, and I want that. I want that. One of the things that people always talk about, and incidentally, just to complete that thought, is once I find somebody, I have to ask that person to help me. Would you help me? I am willing to take directions. I have to say that. I have to say I'm willing to take directions. It's not about, yeah, but I'm not going to question and discuss everything. You tell me what I have to do. Now, I can tell you, those of you who know me know this, but I've celebrated 10-year anniversaries 3 times in recovery. 3 times. How many knuckleheads do you know that could make that statement? So when I came back this last time in 2006, I was ready to take directions. I didn't know it at the time. I just felt recovery was inaccessible to me, that I'd failed at everything I ever tried to do. And some people get it and some people don't. And I'm in that long line of people who just don't get it. And somebody did connect with me and brought me somewhere. And I had an experience that I can only describe as being out of body. I walked into on May 2nd, 2006. And I came back from treatment in January of 2006. But I walked into this room on May 2nd, 2006, and something happened. I felt the force. I felt an energy. I felt a connection that I never experienced before. And I'd never been at this meeting before. I was brought there because I was told that this is where I'd find that connection. And sure enough, I did. People started, it was a big book step study meeting where they followed the big book out of by the teachings of Joe and Charlie, worked through the steps together as a group, hand in hand. And I was ready to, I wanted what everybody there had. It wasn't finding somebody. I wanted what everybody in that room had. I got everybody's number and I was calling and calling and calling. I couldn't get enough. Now, I have to tell you that by that time, in May of 2006, I'd been around for 24 years. I could not tell you with a gun to my head the names of our founders. I had no idea. You see, nobody mentioned those things. Nobody talked about those things. Nobody talked about the steps. Those were things that probably covered holes in the walls at meetings, but they definitely weren't anything that anyone was talking about. And if they were just saying things like, oh, wait till you get to that 4th step. That's the worst. And wait till you get to this and wait till you get to that. And it was all out of context and it was all misinformation. But when I came back in that, as I said, May 2nd, 2006, and I was ready and I heard the message. People were reading out of this book things that I'd heard 100 times 100, and it suddenly had depth and it suddenly had weight, and everything was getting in. Now, I started to go off on a tangent before, and I want to go back to that. When we're asked to tell our story, very often people jump right to page 58. And quote what it says on page 58, that our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what it's like, what we are like now. And please note that it says in a general way what we used to be like, not what it used to be like. If I'm going to tell you what it used to be like, you're going to hear a war story for 20 minutes or 45 minutes. That's what it was like, but that's not what I'm supposed to say. I'm supposed to tell you what I used to be like running my life on self-will. And when I say that my problems are a lot more comprehensive than I ever knew, that's what I'm talking about. That from very early on, this book told me that my problems are here. My problems are from me. They're not coming at me. They're coming from me. That I'm driven by 100 forms of self-will, self, fear. I thought I had an anxiety disorder, and I realized it was all fear. I spent my life in a position where I was filled with anxiety because, and Mark Houston taught me this, that it wasn't anxiety. It was that I was spending my time somewhere else where I'm not, which is in tomorrow and in the future, and somewhere else I've been in the past. That my problems are because of my inability or unwillingness to meet myself where I am, and that is in the now. It was all about the fear, the terrible fear of, and the certainty of what was going to happen tomorrow. And I didn't realize, incidentally, that that was faith. I was told you got to have faith, you got to have faith, you got to have faith. And I thought I had none until one of these guys from that early meeting told me, don't you realize that fear is faith? Fear is just faith that the wrong thing is going to happen, that what you don't want to happen is going to happen, that the things that you dread you're certain are going to happen. All you have to do is turn that inside out and believe that what's going to happen is what's supposed to happen, and that God will take care of you and get you through it, that it's not something to be afraid of. And I had no concept of how to do that. But you people taught me that. Because one of the things I said before is that when we're asked to tell our story, we go to page 58 and we talk about that. And I realized later on that the instructions for how to tell my story are a lot before that. They're on page 29, and on page 29, it tells us that each individual in our personal stories describes in our own language, from our own point of view, listen for it, because here it is, the way he established his relationship with God. That's what I'm supposed to be telling you about. How did I establish a relationship with a power that I wanted nothing to do with? And I'll give you some background. Let me see what the time is here so I get an idea. I should tell you, and many of you know this, I suffer from a handicap. I'm Jewish, which means I spend most of the day, I wake up every morning wondering what it is I've done wrong already, and spend the rest of the day apologizing for things I never did. We're the most oppressed people on the face of the earth. And being raised in that environment meant we observed holidays, we observed traditions, we kept the kosher kitchen. And in case you're not familiar with this particular type of a dietary fascism, let me tell you a little bit about keeping a kosher kitchen. There are certain foods like meat and dairy products that could never be combined. They had to be eaten separately, stored separately. They were never allowed to touch. Other foods like pork products, you could never under any circumstances eat. So as a kid, I thought if I ever ate a bacon cheese burger, I could get struck by lightning. That was the perfect storm of dietary sin. And since that made no sense whatsoever, at a very, very early age, I started to develop these feelings of conflict and confusion about God and religion, because I thought they were one and the same. Now, being raised in that environment meant I had to go to Hebrew school for religious training every day after regular school. So that meant from 3:30 to 5:30 every day, Monday through Friday. Well, actually, Monday through Thursday, and then again on Saturday. From the ages of 9 to 14, I had to go to Hebrew school for religious training, and I hated it. Hebrew school was all about cramming as much dogma as possible into my little mush brain, telling me what to believe and how to stand and what to eat and what to wear and all of those things that religions teach you, because I didn't realize that religions are about a set of practices. What we do here is spirituality, which is a set of disciplines. The set of practices is you want to be part of this club. In my case, it was the Jewish club. You want to worship our imaginary best friend. This is what you've got to do. You've got to dress like this. You've got to eat like this. You've got to do all of these things. And I didn't see the point of it. And I was an inquisitive kid. So when they would tell me all these stories about these fables, everything was a fable and everything was a way to tell us that this is what God's intention was. And I remember being taught about Moses taking the Jews out of bondage in Egypt, that this was proof that the Jews were the chosen people, that God had parted the Red Sea apparently so we can get to Miami Beach, because that seems like where all the Jews wound up anyway. But for whatever reason, he parted the sea so we can get to this place. And that was proof positive that God was chosen, the Jewish people. And up goes my little 10-year-old hand, and I said, well, what about the Holocaust? How does that fit into this little picture you've just created? And they said, well, we don't always know what God's will is. And I thought, you knew damn well what it was a minute ago when it suits you. You can't pick and choose those things. Either you know or you don't know. And don't come off telling me you know. And the reason why you can't tell me is because I'm too young. I don't understand and wouldn't understand. So I had a real chip on my shoulder now also for authority figures, and not wasn't limited to Hebrew school. I had the same problems in regular school. I went through the New York City school system in the late 50s, early 60s. It's a wonder I can even read going through the New York City school systems. But this was a period of Cold War where we were told that at any minute, Russia could drop an atomic bomb on us. And so in school, we had shelter drills. And as I look around, most of you are probably too young to remember these, but in shelter drills, we were told that in case of a nuclear attack during school hours, we were to hide under our wooden desks. Now, let me just rephrase that. We were told by the authority figures of our day that we could survive an atomic fireball, a nuclear meltdown, by seeking refuge under kindling. I remember sitting under that, huddling under that desk thinking, I'm about as safe as a rump roast in an oven down here. Who the hell do they think they're kidding? So I'm having a lot of trouble with authority figures and religions and God. And on a terribly serious note, I got to tell you that when I was 14, my mom died after a lengthy bout with cancer. And when I asked why did God take her? I mean, I'm 14 years old and my little brother's 9 years old. Why would God do that? And my dad told me that he must have needed her very much. And I thought, that is so cruel. That is so unjust. That is so unfair. And I wanted no part of it. No part of anyone who would do that. That seemed just so cruel and unfair. And I should also tell you that around the same time, I had an older cousin who I looked up to as the big brother I never had. He was my confidant. He was my best friend. And around that time, he also sexually molested me. So now I'm feeling I open myself up to somebody, and this is what happens, and this is what God allows to happen. So I wasn't really feeling real warm and fuzzy about God. This was not something I really wanted any part of. I should tell you also that I had my first experience with mind mood altering substances when I was 16. Now, this was the age of Aquarius. This was the real Woodstock era. It was a time of sex, drugs, rock and roll, baby, which eventually deteriorated into AIDS, crack, and Milli Vanilli, but that's topic for another meeting. But the point was that I had a cousin who gave me a tab of 4-way window pane acid, and and this should come as no surprise to many of you here, that I had an experience where I thought I saw God. On LSD, I thought I saw God. Go figure that, right? But when I came out of it, I went searching to make that connection again, because I really felt it. You know, people said it was the drugs. I felt it. I believed it. And I knew I wouldn't find that in that entity or whatever it is in the synagogue, so I didn't bother there. I went to churches and Catholic churches, Protestant churches, Muslim mosques. I went to the Church of Krishna Consciousness in New York, and that didn't work for me because I don't think God would wear his hair like that. So I don't, think that worked at all. But the point is that I tried and I could not find God anywhere. And I found a peace in around 16, 17 years old. I had my first experience with harder substances. I drank a half a bottle of vodka and washed down a couple of downs, and something happened where I immediately felt I could finally exhale. You see, I didn't realize, but I spent most of my life feeling like experiencing a spiritual malady, and I didn't even know that. That I was constantly acting as if and feeling wrong, went about life terrified of saying something that you would laugh at me and I'd be humiliated. And I had this drink with these pills, and it gave me the ability to function like a normal person, like I thought a normal person would function. The book tells us that we lose the ability to tell the truth from the false, and we think that that's the only real way of living. And that's what I thought. I thought if you have diabetes, you have to take a certain medication to be normal. Well, whatever it is that I had wrong going on up here, these chemicals made that go away. I felt comfortable in my own skin for the first time. And I wanted that to stay forever. I didn't want that to stop. And so I tried every possible means for a good 10 years of taking as many types of downs and alcohol and drugs as I can get my hands on, just to feel normal, just to function. Initially, I'm doing it to have fun. Moments sublime with intervals hilarious is what Bill called it. And I pretty much agree that that's the way it was for me. But it didn't take long till I got to drinking and drugging to function. That in order for me to just
John. Mute it up.
okay, thank you. In order for me to just feel a part of anything, in order for me to get up and brush my teeth and get ready for work, I had to have something in me. And if this were a movie, there might be a blurry screen and a title card that came across that said New York, February 1983. And I was, at that time, I was living on a steady diet of intravenous cocaine and Jack Daniels. I weighed about 80 pounds. My skin was gray and translucent. My arms looked like a battlefield in Beirut. I was spitting blood, having seizures on a regular basis because of the combination of drugs and alcohol I was taking. I was living in a one-room apartment below street level in Manhattan. It was the kind of place where if I looked out my window, all I'd see were shoes going by on the pavement. It was a paranoid's delight. It was the kind of place where if I ever considered attempting suicide by jumping out my window, I'd first have to leap up to even hit the pavement. What I'm saying is nothing in my life was going the way that I thought it should. And that's when I found intravenous cocaine and Jack Daniels. And I suddenly had a moment of clarity where I realized I was no longer afraid of dying, but I was terrified of continuing the way that I was living. So I finally asked for help. Instead of being dragged by my dad to different therapists, I asked for help. And he had me, took me to a new doctor who had me admitted to a treatment center in Connecticut. I left New York. And that treatment center brought me to you, to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And nothing in my life has been the same since. Now, I've got to tell you, I'm not one of those people who came in here happy and joyous and isn't this great? This is fun. We're going to get together every day and we're going to eat these crappy cookies and have this stale coffee. And I think they told us on Thursday we're going bowling. Isn't that great? And I hate bowling. I can't stand bowling, but this is the kind of shit that they were talking about doing. And I just felt, like I said in the beginning, I felt a connection there. I felt a part of this thing. And I thought that that was the answer. And you told me all I had to do is not to drink and go to meetings and everything would be fine. That's what I heard. That's what everybody talked about. They came to the meetings and they shared the ongoing adventures of Aunt Fanny and Uncle Fudd and came back the next day to give you an update on Fanny and Fudd. And that's what this was about. This was about connecting with other people because I thought my problem was lack of connection. And as long as I made that connection, everything would be okay. So I decided to stay in Connecticut. I relocated. I was told if you get in the center of this thing, you can't fall off the end. So I got deeply involved in fellowship activities. I was going to 5 to 7 meetings a week, found a career here, got married. We had a child. And I stayed sober for 10 years on fellowship alone. But somewhere in my 7th year, that life's vicissitudes, let's call it, dropped on me. A health crisis in the family meant I could no longer go to 5 to 7 meetings a week. I went down to 0 overnight, from 5 to 7 meetings a week for 7 years, down to 0 overnight. I like Andy Dufresne in The Shawshank Redemption. I disappeared like a fart in the wind. I was gone. And I somehow managed, I don't know how, to stay sober for 3 more years, I think just on dumb luck. People told me that when you go to meetings, it's like stockpiling. It's like a savings account so that whenever you have to not go to meetings, you could draw out of that and live on that. If you ever hear that, don't believe that. There are so many mistakes that I made over the years. One of them was that don't drink and go to meetings was the solution. The other one was that if you stockpile enough meetings, you can always draw from it like a savings account, which is just preposterous. And on my 10th anniversary, I celebrated by helping myself to a handful of pain meds that were all around me at the time. And I got caught out faster than I never thought possible. You see, they told me this was a progressive disease. Even when I wasn't drinking and drugging, the disease was progressing. It's like it's running alongside of me the whole time. And that when I picked up after 10 years of not using, my body acted as if it had been drinking and drugging every one of those days that I was not. And plus, I'd aged 10 years. So my ability to process these chemicals were not what they used to be before. And I got caught out so fast that, like I said, it just made my head spin. In August of 1993, I got honest. Came back into treatment, returned to the rooms, determined to do things differently. I was never going to stop going to meetings. I was going to get a sponsor finally, and I was going to use them. Now, incidentally, the whole notion of God, which was something that I avoided. I did everything I could to stay away from that it just didn't pertain to me. And again, someone told me, if you get a firm foundation in the first 3 steps, you'll never have to drink again. And God didn't really enter into it at that point, because the higher power, I was told, can be something as simple as a doorknob. That's the kind of nonsense that I was told. People tell you that, get away from them. You know, you hear at meetings all kinds of things that just, I do a whole talk on that, ain't in the big book, because you hear things like, just get your body to the meeting, your mind will follow. You hear that, stay away from those people, because the last thing in the world I need showing up at any moment, at any time, is my mind. My mind is the predator. My mind is sucking life out of me. It's like an umbilical cord that I'm connected to, and it's choking me to death. That's self. So anytime that self shows up, I'm in trouble. So they tell you that kind of stuff, stay away from that. That stuff, think. No, that's not the way to do things. Again, this is the mind that got me here, and you're telling me to go back to it. My favorite one is just do the next right thing. How the hell do I know what the next right thing is? Doing the next right thing got me here. So again, I'm being told to rely on my judgment. But in any case, so I spent 10 years again on those first 3 steps. That was all I had to worry about, was what my sponsor called the spin dry recovery, which is go to meetings, share, make commitments, go to meetings, share, take commitments. 1, 2, 3. And I did that for 10 years, and I stayed sober again another 10 years, until on my 10th anniversary, shortly afterwards, I got really sick. And the doctor said, we're going to have to put you on pain meds for a year. And I was so relieved and so happy. This was like the greatest gift anyone could give me. I had a legitimate excuse, and they said not to worry. We know what your history is. When the time comes, we'll support you and we'll wean you. And I bought into that. I never thought for a minute that in the past, there was never any force on earth that was ever able to successfully tell me when it was time to stop. So they put me on it. And when a year came and they started to wean me, I started doctor shopping, stealing medication everywhere I could. And 1 year turned into 2.5 years. And when I lost what I thought at the time was the best job I ever had, because of this relapse. And incidentally, I got to tell you, I did it in a vacuum. I didn't tell a soul I was on pain meds. And just as a kind of side note here, in the last 16 years, I've had a number of occasions where I've had to take pain meds. And I had a plan. The plan begins with accountability. I told everybody around me that needed to know I was going to be on pain meds for an extended period of time. I put those pain meds in somebody else's hands. At one point, my brother came over from China, where he was teaching, to stay with me for a month. And the only reason he came over was to hold those pain meds. And when the time came and I didn't need them anymore, we threw them away down the garbage disposal, and he went back to China. The point is accountability. I didn't have it in my hands, and every time I took a pain pill, I had to text my sponsor and tell him I was doing it. And when he asked me, do you really need it? And I had to think about it, that was the time to throw him away and get my brother on a plane and go back to China. I had a plan. I didn't have a plan that last time, and I kept it a secret. It almost killed me. So when I came back that last time, as I said before, I felt lost. I just felt that there was no answers for me here. And as I said, somebody walked me into this meeting on May 2nd, 2006, and I became aware of a presence. I felt the nearness of my creator. I couldn't explain to you what that was, but I began to sense the flow of this power into me, that I never experienced before. In 24 years around recovery, I never experienced that. I didn't know what that was like. And I didn't realize that I was looking. I told you I had an experience where I felt the hand of God, so I went looking for God, and I didn't realize that I've been looking every place where God wasn't. I said I went to all of these churches and all of these mosques, and I talked to all of these people and took all of these hallucinogens to find God. And it took the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to tell me where God was. On page 55, I was told he was right here, that God was innate, that he's inside every one of us, that we are born with that power in us. And it's not about going out and finding that power and letting that power in. We got to stop looking for that shit. It's not about finding God and letting God in. God is already in. What I have to do is clear away the clutter that has accumulated on my soul that has prevented that power from getting out. And that's why, as I said in the beginning, the problem was self. And I had no idea what that meant. 1,000 forms of self this and self that. And I had no idea when the book told me that our problems are basically of our own making. I didn't like that. I put that on my 4-step inventory of principles I did not like. But it didn't take long into my 5th step to realize how true that was. That I was constantly setting in motion chains of circumstances that led to my being hurt or harmed, and I was the cause of it all in the beginning. And all I had to do was tap into that power and know that that power, if I trusted it, you see, I like I said earlier, when I came in, they said, you got to have faith, you got to have faith, you got to have faith, and I had none. But again, it took page 47 of the big book to tell me I've been looking in the wrong place, that I don't have to have faith at all. Page 47 told me that it begins at a simpler level, and that level is belief. And I didn't know that belief was hope. Because you see, I had nothing but hope. That's all I had left. That's the last thing I had left was hope. And I didn't realize that hope was belief. Faith is confidence. Faith is certainty. Faith is knowledge and experience. And I didn't have any of that, but I had enough hope to believe what you were telling me. And what you were telling me is if I implemented this plan of action that began by looking at those things in me that are blocking me from that power, then I would start to understand where the problems came from. And I would then be able to make changes in them. See, everyone always told me, you got to change, you got to change, you got to change, but no one told me what or why or how. But thank God for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th step, because it told me what had to change. It told me why it had to change. And the reason why is because when I made decisions based on self, when I made a decision based on being frightened or irresponsible or inconsiderate or dishonest or selfish or self-seeking, I was in conflict with everybody and everything. I collided with the forces around me. I was in conflict with God, myself, and my fellow men, the 3 basic the three basic dimensions of life I was in conflict with. And when I collided with those forces, those forces retaliated. They pushed back. And when they pushed back, I got angry. I got fearful. I acted in a harmful manner, and I retaliated. And I retaliated by getting resentful. And when I was resentful, I drank and I drug. So I started to understand the price of making decisions based on self. When I made decisions always based on what's in it for me, what do I get out of it? Why should I do it? The AA opera, me, 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 me. Well, I had to get off that and start to look at it from a different perspective. On page 61, Bill tells us that, as I mentioned before, that in our best moments are we not a creator of confusion rather than harmony. So I had to realize that if I'm creating harmony, I'm doing God's will. If I'm creating conflict, I'm not. So how do I know how to do the next right thing? I began by asking myself, am I going to create harmony or am I going to create confusion? And I started to understand in that sixth and seventh step the price of that, and that I now have the power to change that because I'm given a neat little formula for when I run into self, when I run into those feelings of frightened, when I'm frightened and irresponsible and dishonest and so on. I now know how to deal with it. I was to invite God in. One of the most overlooked words in our book is the word pause. I pause. I ask God for help and direction to act on the opposite, not act on the defect, act on the opposite, which would be my asset. And then with his help and all of the willpower at my command, because see, God gave me brains to use. So it's the proper application of the will that counts. What am I using it for? Am I using it to advance myself, or am I using it to help you, to contribute to you, to make your life a little bit better? What was I doing with that? And I started to understand how to change. And when I understood I had to change, I also understood I had to make peace with the past. And so in the eighth and ninth step, I did that. And I know I'm running a little bit out of time here, so let me just tell you that the 10th step was my daytime walking around step. You know, we have 12 steps, but in reality, I think we have a lot closer to 6 steps. We have steps 1, 2, and 3, and 10, 11, and 12, because 10 is the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, all rolled into one. And I challenge anybody to work those steps on a daily basis and not grow spiritually. I don't think you can do that. So if I work my 10th step on a daily basis, I would be living according to the spiritual principles that I'm trying to live by now, which are not just harmony versus confusion. It's now living by purity, unselfishness, love, patience, tolerance, compassion, humility, forgiveness. Those are the spiritual principles I try and live by. And in the 11th step, I ask God every day for how to do that. I ask him to help me stay on that path. And the 12th step is about really 3 parts, three steps in one. It's about a promise, the greatest promise we offer the newcomer, which is a spiritual experience, a change in personality, an entire psychic change, to go from what's in it for me to how can I help you? What is defined in our book as moral psychology. That's what moral psychology is, taking someone who's self-centered to the max and actually getting them to give a shit about somebody else. That's moral psychology. And in the first part of the 12th step, I'm given that, and there's nothing free in this life. So in the second part of the 12th step, I'm being charged. I'm being handed a bill. I'm being charged with the responsibility to tell you of my experience, and then more importantly, to help you to have the same. And the third part of the 12th step is the greatest challenge, to practice these principles, these steps in all of our affairs. And if I could do that, when I put my head on the pillow at night, I can look back and say, I am not the same person I was when I started this. And let me just wrap up with a simple statement. I think everybody here, we are very special people. We've been gifted, we've been blessed with the condition that stands to make us better people than we ever thought possible. We've been given an opportunity, and it is just that, an opportunity. It is not a guarantee. It is an opportunity to live 2 lifetimes in one. Think about that. That which we had or have, and that which we never thought possible, all through the God-given grace of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is, as Bill Wilson says, an opportunity not to be missed. So until we meet again, may God bless you all. May you all find your light. Thank you for having me. Peace.